Jagannath. Right? Yeah? I'm sure you've heard. I was joking. What's your favorite one? Do you have a favorite one? Huh? I will. I got the microphone. I'll choose many of them. I'm asking you. Do you have a favorite one? I know you're going to say I like them all. Do you have one that you particularly like? I know, but is there one that's way up there? Not necessarily the topmost, but okay. Yes, I want to read that story. I like that story too. You have one that's your favorite? What's your favorite? What? Huh? Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, that's a very well-known. He likes that one. His favorite. And what's yours? No, our hostess. Yeah. You like that one too. I like that one too. In fact, I was going to read those two. The reading is from Bhakti Purushottam Swami's little skinny book on Jagannath, and he has several pastimes connected with those two personalities. Well, maybe one of the most well-known ones is the Gita Govinda pastime. You know the pastime. But our host and hostess know the pastime. I'm not looking at you, I'm looking at her. You know the pastime. Yeah. So here's the pastime, because it's like hearing Krishna stealing butter. You can hear it again and again, or Mother Yasoda looking inside Krishna's mouth and show me the dirt, and you can hear it again and again. So Jaya Goswami. Anyone here not know who is Jaya Goswami? Everyone knows who Jaya Goswami is. Jaya Goswami, a great poet, long time before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. He wrote Gita Govinda, and there's many nice pastimes related to his life, but specific to his writing of Gita Govinda. It was meant to be sung. It's a Gita, and it's meant to be sung, just like our Nishringa prayers as part of the Das Goswami, Das Astaka, Das Avatar Astaka, not Astaka, Das Avatar Stotra. There we go. So it's sung. At one time, in a village not far from Puri, was a man whose occupation was a gardener, and his daughter was a very wonderful singer, and she liked Gita Govinda. And so one day, while she was picking vegetables, eggplants, right? Eggplants? I'm looking at our host. Padma was picking eggplants, right? In the garden. Yes, eggplants. She was assisting her father. She was... Yeah. But don't tell the whole story yet. So she was assisting her father in gardening, and she was gathering eggplants. And as she was gathering eggplants, she was singing Gita Govinda. And she was singing Gita Govinda so sweetly. Now remember, the village that her father lived was some distance from Puri. Not too far, but it wasn't in Puri. It was some distance from Puri. And Lord Jagannath appreciated the devotion with which she was singing so much, he came to listen. And he was following behind her. And as he was following behind her, some thorn from the eggplant bush caught his upper garment and it fell off. And some other parts of his garment became torn and a little soiled. And when she finished singing, she was gathering up the eggplants, and Jagannath went back to the altar. And the pujaris noticed that the upper cloth was missing, and other parts of the cloth was torn and soiled. So there's different versions of what happened next, but the version that's in this nice book is they became very much filled with anxiety. We've made some offense. What have we done? We had no idea what was. So they decided they would sit in the temple room and just pray and sing the glories of Lord Jagannath, and perhaps he would reveal what was the offense that they had made. And they reported it to the king. We don't know what happened. The king was very angry. The king was in big anxiety. Now I'm responsible for this offense. What has happened? And that night, he had a dream. And in the dream, Lord Jagannath came in his dream and told him what happened. There's a place, village such and such. Young girl was singing Gita Govinda so sweetly. I went. And if you go there, you'll find the upper garment. And so the king was surprised, but he went personally, and there was the garment that had fallen to the ground, verifying that what his dream was in fact Jagannath informing him of what had happened. And he listened to the girl singing, and he understood she's a very special person. So he, the king, invited her and her father to come see him at the temple, the king. And the king made several arrangements. Padma could sing every evening before the deities were put to rest, Gita Govinda, for the pleasure of the deity. And the whole family was moved from their village to Puri, and he gave them a nice place to stay and some arrangements so she could sing every day for the pleasure of Lord Jagannath. And Padma then became known as Devi Dasi. And since that time, collectively, Devi Dasis are still to this day engaged at a certain period of time in the evening hour singing Gita Govinda for the pleasure of Lord Jagannath. Now, the version that you may have heard is a little different, because usually stories, over time, they change a little bit. But it's the basic story. Here's one that I'm looking at both of you, because did you live in Puri, or you just visited Puri often, or you're from Puri? So okay, that answers the question. Do you know the life of Ganga Mata Goswamini? You know of her? You know a little bit about her? You know where Sweta Ganga is? Sweta Ganga. You've heard of it. You've seen it. You don't know exactly where it is. Okay. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. You know who is Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya? Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a priest, or yeah, he was a Brahmin. Bhattacharya was a Brahmin, and he worshipped a Damodar Shila, and he was the main scholar in the kingdom of Prataparudra. So there's Ganga Mata Goswamini, she became known as. In her childhood, she was a princess. She was the only child of her father, and because there was no son, the expectation was that the daughter would get married and she would be the queen and the king would be whatever you call the wife of the queen or the husband of the queen. So she let her father know the only one I'm going to marry is Lord Narayan. And how are you going to marry your daughter to Lord Narayan? So she didn't get married. The father passed away, so she became the queen without a husband, without a king. There's a long story about her life. She ended up on the pretext of visiting holy places. She was actually searching for a guru. She went to Puri. She heard about the devotees in Vrindavan, because this was sometime not so long after Mahaprabhu's activities. So the headquarters for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas at that time was in Vrindavan. She went to Vrindavan. Long story, many details. She became an initiated disciple of a grand disciple of Gadadhar Pandit. She became very qualified from hearing from him in speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, because Gadadhar Pandit trained his disciples to speak Srimad Bhagavatam, because he was a very elegant speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Haridas Pandit became her spiritual master. She went to live at Radhakund for some years. And after some time, Haridas Pandit, her guru, told her there's a deity in Puri, a Damodar Shila, that's not being worshipped. It's Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's deity. So go there and worship that deity. Now, ladies don't worship Shalagram Shilas worshipped by a Brahmana, but he instructed her to do it. And so she went there, and they allowed her to do it because she was very, very qualified. In course of time, she also, after her puja in the morning, she spoke Srimad Bhagavatam. She had a big Bhagavatam class. Eventually the king came to know about her Bhagavatam. He was very moved by her speaking. He offered to build her a temple. She said, no thanks. And, because I don't need it. I don't need opulence. You can make some arrangement for something nice for my deities. So he made some arrangement that each day she would get something to offer to her deities. There's details. Then one day, it was Ganga Sagara. Ganga Sagara is a special festival where the pilgrims from all over the place go to where the Ganges flows into the sea, and they like to bathe in the Ganga. So she wanted to go. Everyone was going. She couldn't go because she was instructed to worship the deity. So what happened was, in a dream, it was at night, she was told, you just take bath in Sweta Ganga, because Sweta Ganga is not different than Ganga. It's a kund, or pond. So when she went to take her bath at night, when there was no one around, the water of the Sweta Ganga started to rise and carried her all the way into the temple room. When she was carried into the temple room, she saw many, many, many sadhus having kirtan in front of the deities at night in the temple room. The guards heard all the noise, what's going on in the temple room, and they quickly went, and when they quickly went, they didn't see Sweta Ganga in the temple room, they didn't see the kirtaniers, they just saw this lady in the temple room. They thought she's a thief, wanting to steal from Jagannath. So they put her in jail. And that night, the king had a dream. Jagannath appeared in his dream and scolded him severely, saying, I brought her here. She's my devotee, and I brought her here on this particular festival day. And you put her in jail. You go immediately and release her from jail, fall at her feet, and beg forgiveness, and you should take Diksha from her, the king, from a lady. So that's what the king did, apologized profusely, and her Gangamata Goswamini's response was, this is Jagannath's sense of humor. She wasn't ruffled at all. So the king became her disciple, and many of his ministers became her disciple, and then many other nice pastimes. So this is a Jagannath Leela with Gangamata Goswamini. Next time you go back to your home place, you'll visit, I'm sure. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's deities, and then there's more. There's more things that happened. A Krishna deity that came to her. It's a long story. But we're with Jagannath tonight. Again, because you're a host and hostess, I'm looking at both of you. Are you aware of the description of Ramanujacharya visiting Puri? Yeah. One of the things, so just a background, he was a reformer of not proper standards of worship. As he traveled here and there are many temples throughout South India that are led by, organized by, serviced by Sri Vaishnava Brahmins. Before that time, their worship standards were all over the place. So he came, saw what they were doing, and instructed them according to the agamas, the scriptural teachings, how the deity worship should go. And then he trained, the tripod just moved, then he trained some local people. He gave Diksha to those local people, and then over the generations it became a Sri Vaishnava temple. And that was a practice. So when he went to Puri, he also saw standards that were not from the agamas. And so he tried to give some instruction to the pujaris how to do according to the agamas. And of course there's different narrations, but Lord Jagannath liked being worshipped the way that he was being worshipped. And so according to Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, he was thrown a huge distance all the way to, according to he went to Navadvip. No, he went to some other places as well. What? Yeah. I'm aware. But I'm just, from Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, it doesn't say he was sent to Kurmakshetra. He was sent to Navadvip, and then to Kurmakshetra. Now, this Navadvip Dham Mahatmya is written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Anyway, so that's a pastime with Lord Jagannath and Ramanujacharya. I'm just going to read. It may differ from what you're used to. Be prepared. But Raghu Das was a devotee of Ramachandra. Jagannath. He lived in Puri under a big umbrella near the lion gate of Jagannath temple. Once he went to see Lord Jagannath, he saw Lord Ram, Lakshman, and Sita on Jagannath's altar. From that day, he was convinced that Lord Jagannath was not different from Lord Ramachandra. And he had a very special relationship, a relationship of friendship, Sakya Ras. Then there's the Garland Story. That's probably the most celebrated. He made a very special garland with great love and devotion for Jagannath. He brought it to the temple and offered the garland to the pujaris to give to the deities. But when they saw that the string wasn't from cotton, but it was the bark of a banana tree, they wouldn't offer it. So they gave the garland back to Raghu. So he took the garland, went back home, and he was feeling very sad. In fact, he couldn't sleep. He was crying and crying. The same day, the pujaris were doing their regular puja, and they tried in various ways to place flowers on the altar and garlands on the deity, and nothing, he wouldn't accept any of it. It fell off. Every single flower would not remain on the Lord's body. So they became very worried. They must have done some offense. They decided they would fast until Lord Jagannath revealed to them what was the offense. So the head pujari had a dream. That night, the head pujari had a dream. And Lord Jagannath told him in the dream, what happened? You refused this garland of Raghu, and I'm not going to accept anything. You go to Raghu, fall at his feet, beg forgiveness. The pujari woke up. He informed the other pujaris. At night, they went to Raghu's home, and not his home was the umbrella outside the lion gate, and told him what happened. They found him crying. He heard the story. He was very happy. He gave the garland, and Raghu was in ecstasy. That's the main story with Raghu, but there's many others. Because he lived there for his life. So one time he had a very serious disease, and so serious was his disease that not only was just fever, but he couldn't control his body. He was passing stool on his body, and he was like unaware of what he was doing. Very, very serious disease. So one small boy, unknown to Raghu, came while he was like unconscious and cleaned his body with a bad smell, the stool that was on his body, and rubbed his body with fragrant sandalwood and camphor, and purified the whole room, the place where Raghu was lying down. And when he came to external consciousness, he saw this little boy. And he immediately understood it was Lord Jagannath. And then he had this conversation with him. Why have you done this? This is a big offense for me. Accepting service from you, this menial service, this is horrible. You're all powerful. You could have just cured my disease. And Lord Jagannath said, yes, I could have cured your disease, but you must understand, I enjoy serving my devotee as much as my devotee enjoys serving me. And I wanted that all this disease would come, so all your prarabdha karma would be gone. And then you would be able to come back to me in my spiritual abode at the end of this lifetime. friendship. Raga was very simple, and his nature was like a small boy's. His relationship with Lord Jagannath was very friendly. Sometimes the Lord would come to him in the form of a boy, and they would both play together. It was known to people in general that the Lord came to Raghu to play with him. Everybody respected Raghu. He was very famous and known among the people as the friend of Lord Jagannath. Then comes the jackfruit story. One day, Jagannath came to Raghu and told him, "I want you to come with me to steal some jackfruit from the king's garden." And Raghu said, "Why do we want to steal from the king's garden? Just tell me that you want some jackfruit, and I'll go get some jackfruit, the best jackfruit that's available." "No, I want to steal from the king's garden. Come with me. In my pastimes as Krishna, I like stealing from the house storerooms of the gopis, although Nanda Maharaj had ample butter. So come with me." So he was kind of coerced into stealing with his friend. So Jagannath made a plan. You climb up the tree, and I'll be at the bottom. You find the best jackfruit at the top, toss it down, I'll catch it, and then we'll run away. And so what's a friend going to do? He climbed up the tree and got the best jackfruit and tossed it down to Jagannath, and Jagannath wasn't there. It splattered on the ground. And the guard in the king's garden heard the crash of the jackfruit on the ground. And he went there, and he just saw the smashed jackfruit. He looked up in the tree, there was Raghu. And they had greatest regard for Raghu. He said, if you wanted a jackfruit, why don't you just tell me, and it could have made some arrangement. So he told the gardener what happened. The king could not believe that Raghu had entered his garden to steal jackfruit. So the king gathered his ministers. The gardener went and told the king, and the king went to see. That's what the story is. Raghu came down from the tree. The king asked Raghu, "My dear Prabhu, if you desire to eat jackfruit, why have you gone to the trouble of coming to my garden in the middle of the night and climbing a tree? You could have told me. I would have picked the jackfruit and sent it to your house." Then Raghu told the king, "This was Jagannath. He put me up to it." And the king was very happy. Everyone laughed at the humor of Lord Jagannath, putting his friend in difficulty with the king. The final section here is a devotee gave an eyewitness account of one Leela of Raghu with Lord Jagannath during Rath Yatra. The deities were on a chariot. The king had swept the road, and everything's ready for the chariots to start to roll. They're ready to pull the ropes, and thousands of people were pulling the ropes, and the cart wouldn't move. So the British ruler at the time, he came out and got some powerful elephants to try to pull the chariot. The chariot wouldn't move. The British ruler told Raghu, "What kind of lord is this? I've engaged in elephants, and this chariot will not move." Hearing this, Raghu climbed the chariot, went close to Lord Jagannath. He spoke into the Lord's ears. Immediately the chariot started to move. You've heard that one before? You've read the book? Oh, okay, so you know the story. Wherever Raghu lived, he would leave a pot full of prasad outside for anyone to take. He would take prasad from the same pot that animals and birds took from. He was very dear to Lord Jagannath. So you know the story. You know the tailor, the hunchback tailor. You know the story. So let's do some other ones, because this is for you all. Doesn't say what he said. You have to ask Jagannath. Here's from Padma Purana. Ratna Griva, a king of Kanchi, was king of Kanchi for a long time. And then he moved on from his kingdom and became a detached former ruler, turned the kingdom over to his sons. In this detached stage of his life, he had a dream. And in his dream, he saw an ascetic Brahmana. The next day, going to his royal assembly, so he apparently hadn't retired yet, he saw the same Brahmana that he saw in his dream. And the Brahmana that he saw in his dream told him about Purushottam Kshetra in Nilachala. And he was informed that by the mercy of Sri Vishnu, even the tribal people who carry bows and arrows have 4 arms. And then the Brahmana is telling him this story. This is from Padma Purana. There's a small boy named Prithu who is from that tribal community. He climbed a blackberry tree to collect some blackberries. From the top of the tree, he saw a temple, the spire of the temple of Vishnu. The top was bedecked with jewels and gold. So the boy, out of curiosity, went to the temple, and he entered the temple, and there he saw a 4-armed form of the Lord, conch club, disc, and lotus in his hands. And he took some grains from the Lord's remnants that were scattered on the floor of the temple, and immediately he manifested 4 arms. This is Padma Purana. And the other tribal people, they heard. So they also went. They also took some grains. They all manifested 4 arms. In this way, the young boy, Prithu, first discovered the temple of Lord Vishnu, and then the others cleansed the whole area in and around the temple. That's the discovery of the temple by tribal people from Padma Purana. There's another Jagannath story, and the main character of this other story is Indra Swami. Doesn't give a time period, but Indra Swami, a sannyasi, had traveled through holy places all over India, and he eventually ended up in Puri, and he settled down in Puri. And he had a practice of going every day for darshan of Lord Jagannath. And he also had a potential of a capacity of meditating on Lord Jagannath within his heart. So within his heart, he would enter the temple and come before Lord Jagannath as well as in the temple. And every year, Lord Jagannath comes out from the temple and goes to Gundicha and stayed for some days. And the Jagannath deity first manifested very near where the Gundicha temple is. It's Sundarachala. There's Nilachala and Sundarachala. And he manifested there. It's from Skanda Purana, all the details of the Jagannath being carved, etc., etc. So there's a certain name for that altar at Gundicha, and there's another certain name for the altar at Nilachala. See. In the Puranas, Indra Swami read, I never leave this place, even if my temple is broken. Even during the time of Mahapralaya, I will be here. So Indra Swami was bewildered because the scripture, the Lord says he's not going to move, and then he moves for some number of days and it comes back. So he was in disbelief that the Lord's going to leave. But the Lord came out of the temple after his Snan Yatra and came out of the temple and got on his cart, and off he went. And he said, they're mistaken, because the Lord said, I never leave. So he decided he would go into the temple of Jagannath, and he would see the Jagannath on the altar. So he went into the temple, and Jagannath wasn't on the altar. So he decided he'd just circumambulate around the altar. When he began to circumambulate around the altar, immediately a fearsome black form appeared in front of him. The form had long hands and legs, gray hair, and big teeth. His eyes were red, and his tongue was long. Indra Swami was scared. But then he prayed to Lord Jagannath and asked him, who are you? And what are you doing here? Do you think it's all right to frighten the devotees of Lord Jagannath in Jagannath's temple? Please allow me to circumambulate, and then I'll leave. Then the fearsome creature started to laugh loudly and said, who are you to order me? I am the protector of this land, known as Bhairava. I have taken the responsibility to protect this Ratna Singhasana in the absence of the Lord. At this time, no one can see or touch the Singhasana except me. If you want to take darshan of Lord Jagannath, you have to go to Gundicha. Your desire for darshan of the Lord will be fulfilled there. Indra Swami was crestfallen, very confused. How is this possible? The Lord said, I never leave. That night, Indra Swami saw a dazzling light in his room. And from that light, Lord Jagannath appeared and said, Indra Swami, it is true that I am now staying in Gundicha temple. If you go there, you will definitely have my darshan. The Adapa Mandap is my place of birth. All protectors of yajna stay there eternally. When I left this Nrsinga Kshetra, at that time I could hear all the yajna rakshis crying, and they, along with Ardha Shoshani Devi, approached me. They fell at my lotus feet and said, Dear Lord, if you leave us here and go to Nilachala, then there'll be no one to protect us, no one to take care of us. How can we have darshan of your lotus feet, which are worshipped by Lord Brahma? Please deliver us. At that time I told them, Oh, yajna rakshis, you will have your portion of yajna. I will come here once a year. At that time, everyone will worship you. They will see me on the mandap in my yajna purusha form. You should know me as yajna purusha. For those 9 days when I come here, Nilachala will be empty. My devotees will not go there. All the demigods, riding on their respective chariots, will come here to Sundarachala to have my darshan. Only Kshetrapal Bhairava will stay behind to protect my place. Whoever sees my yajna swarup here at Gundicha will be freed from suffering of all kinds of disease, etc., etc. Then the Lord departed. So after hearing this, Indraswami knew what to do. He went to Gundicha had darshan of the Lord, and now he understood the mystery. Now, most likely, you have not... Oh, where he's gone. She's gone too. Uh-huh. Well, I have a 14-page document, which Prema-Datri is going to see you get a copy of because her printer's not so good. Otherwise, I was going to leave you with the printed copy, but she can send you a nice copy and you can make a nice print out of it. And these are stories of Lord Jagannath in Navadvip or Mayapur. Do you know any of those stories? Ah. Okay. Do you want to hear the Jagannath? Okay. Okay. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has established the following in his Navadvip Dham Mahatmya. There's a history of how the deity of Jagannath in Puri is also not just another Jagannath deity in your living room, but is the same as Jagannath in Jagannath Puri. Around the 7th century, when Yavana king named Rakta Bahu appeared in the region of Orissa. He was very sinful and irreligious and caused great devastation, destroying temples and terrorizing the hearts of the pious people of Orissa. When the devotees of Lord Jagannath in Puri came to know about the mischievous Rakta Bahu, they became very much afraid. They immediately approached Lord Jagannath. "Oh, worshipable Lord, we're in great anxiety knowing that a miscreant named Rakta Bahu is breaking down all temples and destroying the deities inside. He is now proceeding in this direction. He may come at any moment and attack your temple. If that happens, then we will have to give up our lives because we'll never be able to tolerate any action against you. Please save us from this danger by making proper arrangements for protection of your divine form and the temple." Being approached by his devotees, Jagannath appeared in the dream of his head priest that night. "My dear Pujari, I am completely overwhelmed by perceiving the ardent love and devotion that your devotees have for me. You all love me more than your own self. This is the symptom of a pure devotee. Actually, nobody can harm my divine form or my temple. I certainly need not worry about that. Just by my powerful will, I can keep all miscreants away from the place where I stay with my beloved devotees. But in order to bless my devotees and to reciprocate with them, many times I accept this kind of hardship willingly. In this way, my devotees' love and attachment for me increases manyfold. And since this is the desire, I establish their love for me in a more prominent way. Tomorrow, therefore, please remove the deities of myself, Balaram, and Subhadra, and set out for Bengal." Never heard this one, right? No. Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Navadvip Dham Mahatmya. "You should take the path through the jungle so that you can easily escape Rakta Bahu, who is coming by the main road. Have no fear I will always protect you. The Lord then disappeared from the dream, and the Pujari woke up. He immediately broadcast the message, and they all started to make the proper arrangement for the Lord's journey. So he went from Puri to Bengal. When the message reached the Shabaras that the Lord wanted to leave for Bengal, they immediately made all necessary arrangements for the departure the next morning, etc., etc. The next morning, after the deities had been worshipped, the Shabaras again started for their destination. In this way, they spent 11 days, and on the 12th day, they arrived in Simantadweep, one of the 9 islands of Navadweep Dham. That night, Lord Jagannath appeared in the dream of the head Shabara and expressed his desire to settle in this very place, which was transcendental in all respects. So they settled there. Till today, the Shabara village, located near the Jagannath temple, is called Shabara Dariga.
Someone is at the front door.
So that was the 7th century. Fast forward, 16th century, during the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so late 1500s, early 1500s. There was a devotee named Jagadish Ganguly. Jagadish Ganguly lived in a village near Mayapur. A very elevated Vaishnav, and even he was very old. Every year he traveled his long journey to Jagannath Puri and traveled with other devotees, etc. One day, Jagadish's happiness was ruined. He was stricken with a serious disease that left him totally blind. Their children are having a great time. Okay. Jagadish Ganguly became blind. When he realized that he could no longer see the divine forms of Lord Chaitanya and the Jagannath deities, he became very depressed. Worse, his friends considered the pilgrimage to Puri too long and too dangerous for a blind man, and they refused to take him with them. So he stayed back in Navadweep, filled with lamentation, even considered suicide. One night, Jagannath appeared to him in a dream. Blind Jagadish Ganguly. The Lord told him, when Jagadish went for his daily bath in the Ganga, a log would touch his head and restore his vision. The Lord told Jagadish that he should take that log and go to a nearby village where a devotee carpenter lives. The Lord explained that the carpenter would refuse the work because he was a leper and had deformed hands. Jagadish would have to insist and convince the carpenter to do this work. On completing this job, the Lord assured the carpenter's leprosy would immediately vanish. So Jagadish, blind, with some assistance, he left to take his bath in the Ganga. A log touched his head. His vision became restored. He took the wood, took it to a nearby village. Sure enough, there was a leper carpenter. The carpenter refused. How is it possible I'm a leper? How can I carve a divine form of the Lord with these hands? Jagadish explained that the dream, the whole thing, and his vision came back, and your hands will come back. So Jagadish stayed with him day and night with the leper until the work was finished. And blood was oozing from the stumps that were once his fingers. Jagadish kept him going. And finally he finished. And then Jagadish established the Jagannath deity, and the leper was cured. A few nights later, Jagadish had another dream. This time, Lord Jagannath instructed him to take some nearby neem wood to the same carpenter and have him make deities of Subhadra and Balaram. So that happened. The deities that are now being worshipped in Mayapur by ISKCON are those same deities. Legend has it that after the demise of Jagadish Ganguly, the Lord, being dissatisfied with the neglectful state of his worship, decided to end his manifest pastimes. Suddenly there was an outbreak of cholera. The inhabitants of the surrounding area assembled at the temple and prayed to Jagannath to have pity on them and save their lives. That night, Jagannath came to the head priest in a dream and said, "One of the housewives of the Ganguly family, who is characterless, dared to dishonor me. For this offense, everyone in the Ganguly family and the village will die if they do not leave the place." The next morning, the villagers found the members of the Ganguly family dead and immediately deserted the entire area. Since there was no more worship at the temple, Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra were forgotten, and save for the flat roof over their heads, the temple fell down around them and was soon covered by the surrounding jungles. You want to hear the rest?
Yes.
It's not over yet. Okay. The following is narrated by the daughter named Gauri of a Brahmin named Patik Chatterjee. During the Bangladesh War in 1971, there was a lot of communal agitation in India because the area where the Jagannath deities are presently being worshipped is a Muslim area. And there was an Muslim-Pakistan war going on and a Bangladesh war. So the Pujari, he had 7 daughters. He was concerned they may be at risk. So he moved to Katwa to protect his daughters. But one of the local Muslims from here went to him and said, "Please come back to Rajapur." The father of the daughters refused. The Muslim said, "We will give you all protection." Again, Chatterjee refused. Then the Muslim said, "Actually, we have been hearing voices coming from the temple. They are saying, 'Why isn't anyone coming anymore? Why no one is feeding us? We are very frightened. Please come back, and we promise to give you 24 hours guard.'" So he came back, and the villagers gave him protection. So the deity has been in this shed, or the abandoned temple, telling the Muslim people, "Someone come and feed me." When one of Mr. Chatterjee's daughters was getting married, a group of antisocial people turned up. He knew they were dacoits. But since the wedding was underway, he invited them in. "Please come, eat something." Later, the group were discussing amongst themselves, and people were watching them because a wedding means there's valuables, there's gold and things that thieves can steal. Then the group began to argue among themselves, and finally they broke away from each other and left. A few nights later, the leader came back and knocked on Chatterjee's door. saying, "I want to speak to you." Chatterjee replied, "I'm not going to open the door. Please don't mind." The robber, the dacoit, said, "I want to tell you something. Actually, that night of the wedding, we came to rob you. And while we were planning to do it, I saw a light coming from Jagannath's temple and hover over you. I knew that it was not an ordinary thing. I told the others what I saw and told them, we won't be successful in our job. We won't do anything tonight." But some members wanted to go ahead anyway with the robbery, and they became angry, and a fight broke out, and everyone left. Thus, Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra protected Chatterjee. One Snan Yatra day, Chatterjee's wife, named Nirmala Devi, became very ill. There was heavy rain that day, and people had assembled in the temple of Jagannath. His wife, Nirmala Devi, was in bed the whole day. When Chatterjee came back to his house and entered the room, he was astonished to see an unusual footprint in the dust on the floor. He realized that the footprint was none other than Jagannath himself. At once he took some dust from that footprint and placed it on the body of Nirmala Devi, and some of it on his own head. Immediately, Nirmala Devi recovered from her illness. Chatterjee used to worship Mother Kali, and one time he bought a goat for sacrificing. Somehow or other, the goat disappeared. Many persons were deployed to search out the goat, but in vain. The youngest daughter, the one who's narrating this story, went out to search for the goat, along with her niece, Kalpana. While searching, Gauri suddenly saw the beautiful image of Lord Jagannath and Krishna in front of her. Their color was deep black, and their bodies were fully decorated with ornaments. They had crowns that made them so attractive. Gauri saw that both of them were laughing. Meanwhile, Kalpana called out for Gauri. Instead of going back, Gauri tried to attract Kalpana's attention to these images in front of her. But despite all efforts, Kalpana could not see them, and she turned and went away. Gauri followed Kalpana, but she did not reveal anything of what happened. The next day, someone else, Jaimini Ghosh, under inspiration from Lord Jagannath, asked Gauri to tell her parents if she saw anything unusual last night. Then Gauri narrated the above incident. So there's lots of Chatterjee stories, and then contemporaries of them. But I want to go fast forward a little bit to ISKCON's time. There was a thief who sometimes used to come to the temple and steal whatever he could. Even though he was warned again and again by his friends that this deity of Jagannath is very powerful and intolerant of any bad behavior, he still continued. One night, he was captured while robbing a house, and the locals chopped off his hands. When the police arrived to arrest him, in his pitiable condition, he made a plea. "I know why this has happened to me. Before you take me to jail, please take me to Jagannath's temple so that I can beg forgiveness from him." The following story was told by Srila Prabhupada's godbrother, Damodar Maharaj. I was having darshan of Lord Jagannath at the previous temple, then the ISKCON temple, when the pujari brought the bhoga offering. Having been a pujari at the Yogpith for many years, Damodar Maharaj, Prabhupada's narrating the story, his godbrother, noticed that the bhoga plate was not covered and that there were dogs around. He also saw that something fell into the bhoga plate as the pujari was passing through the door. The Swami, Damodar Maharaj, didn't say anything about it, but later in the day, an old lady dressed in white came and started to chastise that pujari severely. Why are you offering something impure to Lord Jagannath? Why are you not covering the bhoga plate with a cloth? You have to be more careful in the future. Prabhupada's godbrother Damodar Maharaj was surprised and wondered, how could she have known? For he had been alone. There was no one else around at that time. Then he added that one should always be respectful to everyone in the Dham, for it is not easy to discern who is a great devotee. Yeah. Here's a very famous story. It's told by Jagannath Maharaj. When ISKCON was first given this temple and the land, there are many joint owners, and most of them had already signed it over to us. However, Jagannath Maharaj stressed that he didn't want full worship to begin until the remaining persons had signed the deeds. Unknown to him, the pujari was already offering bhoga that had been brought up from Radha Madhava's kitchen in Mayapur. So, upon hearing this instruction, he stopped all the offerings. But that night he dreamed that he was going to wake the deities. He found that they were not there. They were gone. Frantically running outside, he spotted them walking across the fields. Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, where are you going? You're not feeding us. So we're going to Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir, they replied. They have nice prasadam down there. Of course, when Jaya Patakamaraj heard about this dream, he said, I didn't know that you were already making offerings, otherwise would never have told you to stop. I just wanted to make sure the temple was ISKCON's before establishing a high standard of worship, but now immediately continue the offerings. Now we are feeding Lord Jagannath very opulently with over 20 items for Rajbhog, and we hope he is satisfied and will never leave. Let's see. Jananivas, the head pujari in Mayapur, wanted to have a full chapan bhog offering every day, but the temple didn't have sufficient funds. But Jananivas decided to start it anyway. He went before the deities and told them, we're going to offer you chapan bhog for 1 month, beginning from this Purnima, and if you want us to continue it, then you kindly make some arrangement. The first day he took some guests to the Mahaprasadam to take Mahaprasadam, and when he explained about his desire, one guest immediately offered to sponsor the next month. Upon returning to Mayapur, he was telling one devotee what happened, and she in turn offered to pay for the next 2 months. So like that, the program has been going on ever since. Before ISKCON built the present temple, the old temple was buried under a tree that was a combined banyan and peepal tree. The local people say that Lord Jagannath would go for walks. They never actually saw him, but they could hear him, especially on Saturday nights. They would see a glow coming from the temple, a sweet scent would permeate the air, and they would hear jingling sounds, like those of ankle bells. These fortunate residents understood that the independent Lord was taking a stroll. There's many. Shatadanya, Prabhupada disciple from Mayapur, recalls one time while returning from Krishna Nagar, he felt a burning desire for Lord Jagannath's darshan, which he admitted was unusual for him. He told the driver of the car to drive there quickly as it was almost 1 o'clock, closing time, As fate would have it, he arrived just as the pujari was locking the temple door, looking at the pujari, and then at the door, and back to the pujari. He asked in a half-expectant voice, "Is it possible to have darshan of their lords?" "Yes," replied the pujari, as he turned and headed for his room. "Come at 4 o'clock." Feeling disappointed, Shatadanya thought, "Well, maybe I can see them through the cracks in the door." Now they have a system you can't see through the cracks in the door. Save for the glint of some jewelry, the deities were quite indistinguishable in their dark room. He tried the wooden windows, but they too were locked. Lying on the ground, he tried to see beneath the doors. For 15 minutes he was trying, but to no avail. Finally he gave up and walked away despondently. A creaking sound made him turn his head, only to see the temple window swinging open. He rushed back to the windows, where daylight flooded onto the altar, illuminating the deities. Jagannath's fortunate devotee was awarded darshan to his full satisfaction. I mean, there's many. A Muslim girl her eyesight was restored. When there was prior to this present temple, a young Muslim girl from the village had very poor eyesight. There were no proper eye doctors available at that time, and the family was too poor to take her to Calcutta. Many doctors said her condition was incurable. Gradually her vision became worse and worse. Finding no other hope, her family decided to seek shelter of Lord Jagannath as a Muslim family. So they brought her to the temple and told her that Lord Jagannath had helped many people in the past and that she should pray for his mercy. With complete faith in Jagannath, she took Charnamrita for 7 days, and miraculously her vision became normal. Until her last days, she would say that even though she is quite old, she could see very nicely. And there was many Jagannath stories. So you'll get a document that you have to print or just read on your computer or something with all these nice Jagannath stories. You want to tell the other one? The one that I didn't read. Okay. The Hunchback. Go ahead.
We know like Shankaracharya, right? Maharaj. So he was an impersonalist. So, but at the final moment, he read, he wrote the
Bhajagovinda.
Bhajagovinda and Jagannath Ashtakam also. So, how could you understand, like, the difference? Like, he's an impersonalist, but same time he's believing in the personal form of the Lord.
Well, it depends on if you ask a Vaishnava or if you ask an Adi Shankara follower. What's the answer to that question? And the Adi Shankara follower would say, we don't mind bhakti, but bhakti has a destination. You can worship a form of the Lord, and then there's something on the other end of that form of the Lord. You follow? The Pancha Upasana process is fine, because at the other end of the Pancha Upasana process is Brahman, impersonal Brahman. That's what they would say. And a Vaishnava would say, depends on which Vaishnava, but he was Lord Shiva, he was actually a great devotee, and he made it clear, although I was teaching these other things, was that right?
Maharaj, I have a question too. Thank you. So, in one of the pastime, you were narrating Jagannath is saying, "I can cure you, but I'm not going to cure you because I want the prarabdha to take place, and then you come back to me, right?"
He can do that even without, it's just a pastime. Is that your question?
No, I was saying
You
in
didn't
the
have to put
other,
him through an ordeal. He can just take him back to Godhead. That's fantastic.
yeah, in the other pastime, he was curing I think Jagannath, yeah. No,
It's pastimes. He has variegated pastimes. He's not stuck in a cookie cutter, I got to do pastimes this way. He's reciprocating with different persons according to their regard for him and their loving exchange. And it's just fine. It's just lovely.
Is it okay, Maharaj, if I ask another question?
Sure.
So, in one of the pastime, you mentioned he was the Ganguly family. One of the lady was, I think, engaged in some activities, and that's why he gave punishment to the entire family, even the village.
Yeah.
I mean, if God is so merciful, right? Why would he punish to everybody, all the devotees, all the other
Well,
who are
God is very merciful. Why have material creation? Why have material creation? Why creation?
I mean,
And with creation, there's misfortune,
right,
and people suffer.
yes.
And God is very kind, so why does He do something where people suffer? It's the same. It's the same question. So if somebody does an offense, then there's a responsibility. There's reaction, and reaction is shared by family members, isn't it? As much as benefit is shared by family members. If you become a pure devotee, fantastic. And your family members are also going to benefit proportionate to your spiritual progress. It's in the King Riga story. So many generations, etc., etc. Like Ramchandra Khan, who offended Haridas. Right? You know the story?
No, I don't.
When Haridas Thakur was young and he was being recognized as a saint, a landholder named, he was a Vaishnav, well, he was a Hindu, named Ramchandra Khan. He didn't like that this Muslim fellow was being honored so much. So he sent a prostitute to try to have him fall down.
That I totally
So he was trying to harm Haridas. He offended Haridas.
Yeah.
And then later, many years later, Nityananda came and he also offended Nityananda. So when Nityananda left, the whole village became plagued and deserted because of his offense. Because what a leader does, bad stuff that a leader does, the people suffer. Good stuff, that the piety that's accrued by the leader, all the citizens benefit from it.
okay. Maharaj, thank
It's
you.
just a law of nature. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for wonderful narrations. So I have one question. So in the narrations, so Raktabahu, he's like destroying the temples
Yeah, bad guy.
and he's a very bad guy. So, but the pujari got a dream, and where like Jagannath want to leave from there to Bengal. So, how to understand that one? Because God is omnipotent. Like with His wish, He can take away
Yeah.
the Raktabahu. But why He asked pujari? What to understand from this?
It's just some service. He doesn't need a reason. He's just giving people some service. And like, why did Krishna allow himself to be wrapped in the coils of the Kaliya serpent? He's all powerful.
Yes, Mother.
He's omniscient. He can smash Kaliya with a flick of his toe.
Yeah.
So why did he do it? Because it put his cowherd boys and all the residents of Vrindavan in this intense feeling of wishing his protection. He who doesn't need any protection.
Yes, Mother.
He was inspiring that feeling. And there's the servants, as much as they didn't want to see him leave, they immediately made arrangements for him to leave because that's what he wanted.
Okay, Mother.
Then obviously another Jagannath deity was placed in Puri, and that same Jagannath deity that was in Puri went to Bengal. And he was being worshipped in Bengal for some time at least, and then abandoned. It's a pastime. And then giving Jagadish Ganguly some service.
Okay, Maharaj. Thank you.
He doesn't need a reason. It's just a loving exchange with different devotees at different times for different purposes.
Maharaj, about this story, just I am wondering, is a dream is so important?
Dream is important.
Yes.
Well, if you're Jagannath, then you may want to appear in people's dreams. But Prabhupada didn't give such emphasis to dreams. There was a devotee, I won't mention his name. He would have Prabhupada dreams. And then he would say, Prabhupada instructed this and Prabhupada instructed that. And it was really weird stuff. But, some people were saying, well, Prabhupada said. And then Prabhupada made soft pedaled it. It said, if the spiritual master appears in your dream, you can take it that this is a sign of some special kindness coming to you. But you don't take it in a literal manner. Because when he wanted to say something, he could easily say something. But, Jagannath is playful.
Nowadays, devotees also sometimes, maybe true or false, they claim like that, oh, I saw like this, and that's the reason I'm
Well,
asking the
here's a
question.
Prabhupada
Jagannath.
story. Here's a nice Prabhupada story. It's in Giriraj Maharaj's I'll Build You a Temple, the Juhu story. So one devotee told Prabhupada, it's in his book, Prabhupada, yesterday I had a dream. Krishna came and spoke with me. And Prabhupada leaned back and said, very good. Next time Krishna comes, please tell him that I'm also eager for his association because I haven't seen him yet. And the devotee understood. He was, you don't speak like that. Even if it does happen, you don't go boast about it. Or, it wasn't necessarily boasting. But I attended a Pandal program for a week in Hyderabad once, and the system was kirtan, Prabhupada would speak, and then there was kind of a microphone at the front of the stage, and people would stand in a line to come and ask questions. So one man wasn't asking a question. My grandmother, she does she, at night, the deity comes off the altar and she plays with the deity and da 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 da. And Prabhupada didn't interrupt him, but Prabhupada said the the teaching of our Goswamis is that they were always seeking that association. They don't broadcast. They were able to see Krishna, but their mood was, Hey Radhe Rajadevi Ke Chaladite Enanda Sut. So they would look, searching by the side of Govardhan Hill, by the banks of the river Jamuna, my dear Krishna, where are you? In the mood of separation, not the mood of attainment. And that's the mood of the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So sometimes people say, and who knows, you don't. There's not a cookie cutter answer to some claim like that. But what's the rest of their life like? Is that statement that Krishna appeared and said something, did something, consistent with how the rest of their life is? Or say it the other way, when one's life is actually elevated in conduct, they don't broadcast such things. They're very confidential, and they maintain the mood of searching for Krishna and separation from Krishna. That's the elevated Vaishnava mood. We don't have to smash it or praise it. It's just we don't pay too much attention to such things. They may, but we don't. I was visiting a family's home one time, and I was remarking that it seems that the wife is very devoted to her deities. And she was very mild about it, a little shy about it, and said, yes, I've been engaged for 9 years doing regular service. And then her husband said, she does the same service at her home that a team of pujaris do in a temple. So many offerings and artis a day, every day. And she just smiled. She was like, she wasn't bragging. He wanted to be clear about how much devotion. So I said, wow, you must feel some very strong connection with your deities. And she just smiled and nodded. And then he said, tell him. He said, sometimes the deities let me know that they're appreciating the service. I have a practice when I'm making the offering. I take Krishna's flute and put it in a particular place, make the offering, and then when the offering is removed, then I transfer the offering and go back and put Krishna's flute. And I've been doing that for so many years. And the other day, I went to put Krishna's flute back, and it wasn't where it's supposed to be. And I saw the deities, and there's Krishna with his flute. And she smiled. She wasn't bragging. She was just, quietly smiling. And she there's some reciprocation. When one is very sincere in anything, you're very sincere in chanting, or very sincere in hearing, or very sincere in worshiping, or very sincere in making your Krishna connection, there's reciprocation. But those that are having and experiencing that reciprocation, it's internal. It may be shared in confidential ways with very qualified people, but it's not the business of someone who has a close connection with Krishna is to broadcast it.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for narrating the story of Ganga Mata Maharani. I really like that story.
Oh, the whole story of her life is really fantastic.
Yeah. So I have one question about, when she went to Radhakund and or went to Vrindavan and started living like a more renounced life. Did she leave her kingdom kind of like behind her?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And so do you know what happened
To the kingdom?
to it? Or okay.
No idea.
Okay.
She was a queen. She wasn't a young girl princess. She was a queen. When she went to Vrindavan, she was decked out, and Haridas Pandits tested her, saying, "How can you live the life of austerity in Vrindavan? You're a royal personality." So she understood. She discarded everything that was, fancy, and dressed in a simple cloth. And it's risky. It's certainly risky then, and more risky today. She just slept by the side of the Jamuna River, took her bath in the river, and went and did her thing for a whole year. She lived like a mendicant. And Haridas Pandit could understand. She's very sincere, and attended all of his classes and learned how to speak from the Bhagavatam. So, your question what happened to the kingdom? The ministers of the kingdom must have done something, because there wasn't a successor, and there must be some rules that they have when there isn't a successor. So whatever those rules were is probably what they did.
She didn't care, so why do we care?
Huh?
She didn't care, so why do we care?
Well, the ministers were caring. They're doing their duty.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So in Jagannath Puri, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed the 600 forms, two hand for Lord Krishna, two hand Lord Ramchandra, and for Lord Jagannath. So I want to know more about this. If you put a little bit more about that pastimes.
Sure. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, right? That's what you're speaking about?
The 600 form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Sadbhuj.
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah. You'll find the detail in Chaitanya Bhagavat, because in Chaitanya Charitamrita it describes a little differently, but in Chaitanya Bhagavat it's a 6-arm form. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was like super scholar, and by Lord Chaitanya's arrangement, he, Mr. Super Scholar, wanted to protect the sannyas vows of this very beautiful looking 24-year-old sannyasi. So he volunteered, "I'll protect you by teaching you Vedanta Sutra." And he doesn't need to hear from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya to understand Vedanta Sutra, but he said, "Oh, you're very kind. Sure, I'm indebted to you." So early in the morning, for the whole day, for 7 days, Shankaracharya's teachings on Vedanta Sutra. And on the 8th morning, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, "I don't know if you're understanding me because you don't say anything." And Lord Chaitanya's reply was, I very easily understand Vedanta Sutra, but the more you speak, it makes the whole topic very confusing, cloudy. "Oh, you understand Vedanta Sutra, then you explain to me." So he explained in a way that was so simple. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, "Wow, I've never heard it like this before." And then, "Maybe you can explain the Atmarama verse." And Lord Chaitanya said, "Oh, you're so scholarly. I'm sure you can explain the Atmarama verse. It's a Bhagavatam verse." So, yes, I'll explain. 16 different ways he explained. Then he asked Lord Chaitanya, "Can you explain?" There's a whole chapter, Chaitanya Charitamrita, in 64 ways. In scholarship, different word meanings. 64 ways. And with the little light went on, because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a scholar. And he understood the scholarship of this person is not worldly. Then the next light went on. You're the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya smiled and showed this, according to Chaitanya Bhagavat, this six-armed form, the Sadbhuj form. And immediately he paid obeisances and accepted him thereafter as the personality of Godhead. And he, Sarvabhauma, became his devotee, knowing full well he wasn't just a young sannyasi, but the personality of Godhead. And composed verses, 100 verses in Sanskrit, glorifying him as the personality of Godhead. But your specific question was there was a context. To Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he revealed his divinity. Now, he said, don't tell others, but obviously he told others, because otherwise he wouldn't know. Because it was in exceptional cases where he would disclose his divinity. Because largely he was in the mood and the position of a devotee of Krishna. Anything in the back there? Anyone? Okay. Looks like we're done. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Prabhupada Maharaj ki.